Hello, good evening, and welcome back. So, what does a country do when it doesn't have the Second Amendment, but it's still being attacked by an authoritarian government? Well, it does what Hong Kong has done. So, of course, they have just been able to grab whatever is to hand, and so they have, all sorts of array of weapons. It reminds me of a Dad's Army kind of situation where, people grab pitchforks and whatever bricks and stones, and then petrol bombs as well if they've got access to petrol, gasoline, that kind of thing. Molotov cocktails, if you will. But better than that, as they say, police officer wounded with arrow at campus standoff. Yes, the police officer quite literally took an arrow to the knee. So he used to be an adventurer, like you, until he took an arrow to the knee. Skyrim memes will never die. As long as I'm around, we will make this live on. So it wasn't just bows and arrows that they took, and we can see from the photo that they have down here, it was just a regular arrow that you would use for target practice. There was hardly any penetration, but it was there nonetheless. And crossbows, of course, are very deadly, considering that you can steady it without exerting much pressure, and you can load it up using your full body to really get that force behind it with the bolt. The bolts are then shorter and thicker. And the other thing, because there is that much weight behind them compared to bullets, is that they go through bulletproof vests without an issue. So if you've got Kevlar, something with a sharp point like a knife can obviously slice through it. So the same then goes for arrows. Similarly, because of the weight behind them, they can also penetrate into water much better, which is why they use harpoons and not guns. But nonetheless, instead of using steel-tipped bullets as cop killers, as they're known in America, that you can just use an arrow, which would be a similar situation that would be used in the United Kingdom, of course, should it resort to this. People just pick up whatever they can get their hands on. As we can see here, they have their police vehicle on fire as petrol bombs are being thrown at it, as it's still being driven around, and as also shown, they have just a regular bow here, compact bow to use to fire, as well as using fencing weaponry, as in epées and foils, sabres as well, because that's all they have. So they're not really that sharp. They're just they're small, they're light, and they can hit at a distance. And the same goes for the level of protection they can have in terms of armor, in order to stop themselves being affected. And people use goggles, of course, because the main thing is tear gas. But it is escalating, of course, now as can be seen, with them using very capable, deadly force against the police. And this is because, obviously, Carrie Lam hasn't rescinded the extradition bill, which would say that the laws in China would then apply to Hong Kong as well. So, although they left Britain at the end of the 20th century, 1997, I think it was, to join China in being one country, two systems, and saying you can't encroach on that for 100 years, China has already started to do that. So the point of the extradition bill is to say that you can be punished in Hong Kong for laws that are made in China, including, of course, saying anything bad about the Chinese Communist Party and Xi Jinping in particular, which resulted in so many millions of protests, which are now in their 24th week. And why do they use umbrellas? Well, that's simply because they're used as a light shield. Of course, they were used in protests similar to the yellow vests in the rules and regulations with regards to them. For example, with the yellow vest protests still going on in France, whereby you have to have two in your car. That's why they picked those. But in Hong Kong, they found that the umbrellas are also good to prevent tear gas and being sprayed by whatever chemicals the Chinese government wishes to use on them. And although it's been the Hong Kong police in particular that has been trying to quell the rebellion, there are rumours, and they are quite well substantiated, that mainland Chinese police have come in. And due to the indoctrination given in mainland China about Hong Kong being a separate entity and them not being as loyal and good people, if they're people at all, then of course the Chinese police, instead of the Hong Kong police, are much more violent in their methods, which we've already seen with a protester getting shot, of course. Yes, live ammunition has already been used, however, now they're saying they might use it, so well, you've already used it. As we can see here, that they say, "I hereby warn rioters not to use petrol bombs, arrows, cars, or any deadly weapons to attack police officers." Police spokesman Louis Lau said in a statement broadcast via Facebook, "If they continue such dangerous actions, we would have no choice but to use the minimum force necessary, including live rounds, to fire back." Yes, at this point, I think the Hong Kong protesters are quite committed. That they understand that if they allow the rule to pass, then they are essentially dead anyway, because that's what happens when you have the re-education camps, which is where the Uyghurs go, of course, which are essentially concentration camps. And the World Bank was, of course, put under pressure recently when they were saying that they were going to pledge $50 million, and then decided, maybe we'll change the scope and the blueprint of what we're going to do there. So, well, why did you ever think it was a good idea? But as the Hong Kong protesters have better access to the internet than mainland Chinese, they can see what is happening in mainland China, and that's why they understand how important it is to not allow the extradition bill to pass, and they are willing to fight tooth and nail for it, because they understand if that law is brought in, although some protesters have already been arrested, then they could all be treated like that, and they would lose their freedoms. And if the Chinese government decided to arrest retroactively, then they're all screwed and they would be sent to these internment camps, and their organs would likely be harvested as well, as happens to the Falun Gong practitioners. So they're basically saying, hey, let us control you, take you over, enslave you, and maybe kill you, otherwise we will kill you. It's like, well, they're going to be fine with that. They're going to fight to the death because they've got nothing to lose when it comes to that. And that's why they're just using bows and arrows. So, of course, United Kingdom denizens, do take note, because if the European Union or any other authoritarian force wishes to take over our country, we would have to look to the same level of response as well, of course. That this is what Hong Kong has decided to do, and seeing as even swords in the UK are illegal, up to 50 inches as long as they stay inside, but they can be longer if they're traditionally made. There are those for melee weapons, and bows and crossbows are all still legal in the UK as well, and it's difficult to own a gun, of course, but you can own a crossbow without much issue. So I do recommend that, and get some practice in, just like the laws on the books that they say every boy from the age of 14 should be practicing archery every week. So let's stick to that old law and get back to it. Just might save your life. But I'm sure the Americans are very pleased with their Second Amendment right now, but they don't want that authoritarian government. However, of course, the thing that doesn't make sense is them saying, Donald Trump is a fascist and literally Hitler, and he's trying to take control of us, and using the police, and the police brutality is terrible, while at the same time saying, yes, hand over all your guns to Donald Trump and the police so that they have the monopoly on force and can do what they want to you. But, as I always say, you can't expect logic from leftists. So they go on to say what's happened this time around, as it is getting worse and they're hiding out in a university. They're saying, on Sunday, riot police fired tear gas and used water cannons against protesters at the Poly U, who launched bricks and petrol bombs at them. Protesters took cover behind umbrellas on a footbridge and set light to debris there, causing a huge fire. So they are trying to hide out, or get not hide out. They're trying to make their stand at the bridge. That is where they're holding out. And as you can see, that the police truck set on fire as all these umbrellas are used as shelter. So they're holding down on the Cross Harbour tunnel. On the bridges, they're basically under siege now. So of course, you've got people then trying to leave Hong Kong to come to other countries, and I would say, well, that would make sense. If you actually want skilled immigration, and you're going to be taking people who are a threat from their own government, like Tommy Robinson trying to find asylum in Hungary, of course, with Viktor Orban, but if you're going to allow people like that into the UK, then Hong Kong is surely a fine place to look, just like South Africa. So they go on to say, pro-democracy lawmakers are trying to enter the campus to communicate with those inside, the South China Morning Post newspaper reports. I don't trust Chinese publications myself, of course. China Uncensored has great bits on that. Global News is probably the worst offender, or maybe the Chinese Times. A reporter with a Reuters news agency at the campus says there are grave fears of a bloody showdown. Yes, if you are threatening to people that you are going to end up taking their lives, then of course they will. So we have images of the weapons they use, and then the Chinese soldiers trying to do good optics, trying to show that they're just kind and they're picking up litter on the streets and making everything tidy. But that's it for now, so let me know what you think down below. Do you think it's really getting to breaking point where there is going to be death on both sides? China is going to try and enact Tiananmen Square again in Hong Kong, and that they trust that the West will just forget about it again, like they have done before, of course, with Nepal and Tiananmen Square. Bill Clinton as well, just going, well, these Chinese dollars are too important. The same with Hollywood, of course, saying, we got 1.4 billion people. That's a big audience that we can go to. So we'll take your money and forget about what you've done. Or is Donald Trump going to be the change? The US has spoken about confronting China for a long time, and he seems to be the first one to have actually gone through with it. So will he be the driving force in preventing China from its global domination as it would like to do, with Huawei and 5G, of course, being a contributing factor to that? Let me know down below. Always intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. So thank you very much for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And enjoy your week.